and gentlemen, I know this is that time of year where guys are wrapping up their reading. Some of us are probably disappointed, but we're eager to get started on next year on our list. We want to read through the Bible, and set a path on reading select books throughout the year. So what I would like to bring to you guys is how does a young pastor get the most out of reading? It's a very, very simple question, but how do you guys, because obviously you get torn between overdoing it. You stack them up high, stack them deep. You got 40 to read, and then you're just, you've got the speed set to 2 if you're doing audio, and you're just blasting through it. And then after a while, you realize I didn't retain anything from that because I was too busy trying to go through it than actually retain the knowledge. So I'd like to start maybe with Tony, if you would, the book mentor. What are some ways that we can get the most out of reading?
Well, I think first of all, you have to overcome the idea that once you open a book up, you cannot close it until you have finished it. So you have to overcome that thought. Not every book is worth reading from cover to cover. So,
right.
And as far as me, where most of my books would be of a theological nature, there's very few of them that I do read from cover to cover. Books are tools, and just to keep things simple, I say all the time, I read what I need. So 3 words: need, feed, and seed. So I'm looking at a book trying to answer these questions, and it regards to me knowing myself and where I am spiritually at that moment. And again, that's another thing. I have a lot of books, and a lot of books that arrive every day practically. Do I read them all? No, I can't. And I understand that some books, for me anyway, they're for a season. That doesn't mean that it's right now, but I will be getting to this book sometime. So again, I have to know myself, where I am spiritually, and being a pastor, I also need to know where the church I'm privileged to pastor is as well, because that need is going to translate into me feeding them.
Yes.
So,
right.
That the book has to meet that need for me, so that I can turn around and feed the church. And also, a book needs to be like a seed. It's got to inspire. It's got to inspire thinking in me. It's got to inspire even praise and worship. My book of the year is, I forgot the title. It's on the atonement. And, reading it, there was moments where practically brought to tears, and moments where I'm ready to expound on what I've just read with the church I pastor. And that's why I say you have to overcome this mentality that says, I've opened the book, I've started reading, I have to finish it. No, you don't. No, you don't. Me, if I'm reading and I come across something that is, let's say, ministering to my need, which is going to be out of which I feed, I stop right there, and I begin the process of preparing the meal that I pastor. So I think that's the most important thing. Again, not every book is, as Brother Jackson mentioned, it's not worth your time. It's not worth your time. Get what you can, and then go on. Books, as far as for ministry, they're tools. They're tools. I don't have an extensive toolbox. I do have one. And I would only use, 1 or 2 at a time. And I would use what I needed specifically. So if I need a screwdriver, I'm not going to use a hammer. So again, it goes to need. What is it that you need right now?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it that's going to help you to feed the people of God? And then on the side you can do the stuff that's going to inspire and so forth. But I think that's where everybody trips up the most. Like you haven't read a book unless you read the whole thing. Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Um, I think you need to get what was meant for you to get out of that book, and if there's nothing else to get, yeah, just go on. In fact, I was listening to some theologians who've written some very what's the word, important theological books, and they were describing their reading, and it was very much like what I've just said. Very few of them actually read their books cover to cover, unless it's something pertinent to their expertise or what they're writing on. So I think that's one fear that we have to overcome, and that's I have to finish. No, you just got to get out of that what you need to get, and you have to be selective. You have to know yourself. You have to know the church your pastor, and go from there. Me, I mean, I really do try to when a book comes in, I try to get to know that book. I do read footnotes, and I do skim through the bibliography. Should there be something else that would interest me, I do check out theological schools, journals, and their reviews and so forth. And yet, there are books that I get having done none of that because I trust the individual who is recommending the book. If I'm reading, and in the process of that reading, I come upon something that is just speaking to me, that's it. The book's closed, and I go to my computer, open up my Bible program, and begin working that out in a manner in which I can present to the church, and is going to be it's going to be the meal we needed. We'll put it like that. So,
I'm a dumb reader. I'm not as smart as Tony. I am more haphazard probably. I stack things up, and then it's kind of like a kid in a candy store. I just pace in front of it with my coffee cup in hand. It's always my Apostolic Review cup, on my best days. And I pick out what I want to read next. So I'm a little bit strategic there, but I'm a lot more OCD. I really struggle with not finishing the whole book.
Me too.
And actually, only this year I probably was able to put some down. And you guys will see on my reading list, I've got the asterisk where I said I only looked at pertinent parts because I've done a lot of research for a manuscript that I'm working on. And so some of those books really, frankly, they were of historical interest by authors that had commented on concepts that I wanted to speak about, but the totality of their books was really not worth a serious student's time. And forgive me for saying this, but in some instances, there were some that weren't worth a serious Christian's time for the totality of it. And so, anyway, that's and none of those authors apostolic. I'm speaking of some others that I read, but I have a hard time not finishing the book, so that's tough on me, and I've learned that some from Tony, and I'm trying to keep that in mind. I also underline things in an OCD way, which is dumb because it really slows me down. And then if it's something I really want to talk about, I put it out to the side, and that's sort of the second level of importance to me. And then if it's really, really good and I really want to remember it, I write it down on the front with a page number. And so my books, I guess my kids, but right before they throw it all out, will think, my goodness, what in the world was wrong with Dad? He was scribbling like a madman. Because that's what my books look like. But when I go back, I can find things. And so I sort of leave breadcrumbs for myself. And then like Tony said, I keep kind of a sermon thought file, just like Scott Graham, just not as effective as Scott Graham when it comes to taking those thoughts and turning them into world-changing messages. But I do have a thought file like him. And I sort of, I use those things to help out as I read. But mostly I kind of read for my interest. I love what J.H. Osborne said. He said he reads about stuff that he's not interested in because it expands his view and it expands his breadth. So I think there is reading for breadth of understanding and relating. You know, I mean, if I read a book on bridge building, I'll use that in a sermon someday.
Yeah.
He read a book on goats and turns it into this fit man sermon that we've probably all heard, which is, you know, unbelievable and phenomenal. But that's Osborne. He's a little bit of a storytelling genius. So that's just kind of how he works. But we can read for breadth of experience and human understanding, and then we read for depth of theology and devotion, like Tony was talking about. And different authors speak to different people, but tips in terms of reading while it's the first of the year. If you're an audio guy, do the audio. If you're an audio lady, do the audio. I typically reserve that for things that I don't want to mark up, that I'm not all that interested in, but I feel like I need to go through. And then sometimes I get fooled. I did a Maxwell book, just finishing it up now, and I probably should have gone through that and marked it. And I actually got the physical copy out, and I'm kind of marking some of that up because it turned out to be a lot more helpful than I thought it was going to be. My prejudice was going to be that Maxwell, after 20, 40 books, had probably used up all his utility. And I found out I didn't know as nearly as enough Maxwell on leadership as I should have. It was a really good book for me personally. You guys may be well past it. But I use the audio. I always carry a book with me when I travel. I've usually got one in my truck. I use it to redeem my time. So if I'm waiting on something, rather than scrolling through social media, I like to get out the book and read a few pages here, read a few pages there. I read a lot of books at a time, somewhere between 5 and 7. And so I never read anything that I really don't want to read at that time. I wait until whatever my appetite is for that day. I pick, I look at it as kind of like my kids, set out 5 or 6 nutritious things. And if they want the broccoli and not the peas, no problem. It's still a good meal. And so I use it in that way to kind of keep myself motivated for the reading. And then I do keep a tally and reflection on what I do. So every quarter I kind of list what I've read, and then that kind of helps me understand what I need to read the next quarter and what I need to work on. I've got my stacks of books, but every year I lay out at the beginning of the year what I intend to read, 26 books, one every 2 weeks. And then I usually put in about 20 or 30 bonus books where if I'm reading ahead of schedule, or if I do something audio, then I'm able to read that. That's kind of my pace. I know Brother Bernard does probably 150 to 200 a year. I can't read that fast just because of the way that I read and the purpose for why I read. I'm slower, probably because I OCD mark everything, but that's just kind of my way of doing it. That's not the right way to do it. It may not even be the right way for me, but it's how I manage my reading schedule.
Right. Well, you guys took up all my ideas. No, I guess I know you probably wanted to know what I do. I think for me, a couple are, and I always use this word consistency. And I know every year, people have like, I want to read 40 books or 50 books. I don't necessarily do that. I have a page per day goal. So I have, and it's always 20. I want to read a minimum of 20 pages per day to consistently keep reading. And then whatever that produces by the end of the year, then that's whatever it produces, right? I usually read more than 20, but 20 is my minimum. And that can come two ways. I may read 10 pages in the morning, 10 pages in the evening, depends how my day looks. If it's a busy day with my pastoral duties, with seminary, with school, with my other studies, I may get 5 in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, another 5 before I go to bed on the other material that I'm reading. And so I'm usually reading school material and I'm reading material at the same time. So that's number one. I think if you want to really increase your reading is to give yourself a goal, whether it's 5 pages or 10 pages, just to first become consistent. The other big thing I do is kind of like Brother Mancino, Brother Tony, is I think I've mastered the art of perusing, right? Before I commit to a book, I usually peruse it. I'll go through it. I'll look at some of the main sentences in a paragraph. Like I'll read the first sentence of a paragraph in a couple chapters and I'll say, okay, I think this is going to be worth the investment of my time. So I think the art of perusing is really understated in, how do you say, managing the kind of time you invest in a book. And so perusing is really important. And I think that the other thing when choosing books for me is I'm more author driven than I am title driven. As when I first started reading, I think I was talking to you about this yesterday, Brother Chester, about being, rather than being title driven in your selection of books, I've personally become more author driven. And so I usually try, if I find a good author, I usually end up reading a minimum of 2 or 3 books of his or hers, depending on how much I liked that book, because I feel like I can mine more material from them, and grow. Right. There was a book I encountered this year. I'd never heard of her. Her name's Karen S. Pryor, and she wrote a book on the art of reading, and it was not what I expected. Right. I perused it, and I actually came away from that book a much better reader because of what the content she was providing, right? And so I read. Not only do I read theological books, but I read books that help me read better. I continue to read those kind of books. I don't think I've arrived when it comes to reading. I think people, when it comes to reading, they think they just read, right? But it's like anything else. It's something that can continue to be developed as far as how you're able to retain what you're reading. And better than that, how you're able to use the content to kind of formulate concepts that you begin to own yourself, right? And so you take this content, you're reading, you have things you're dealing with in your life, you have issues, subjects, especially as pastors, right? We have a lot of subject matter we're dealing with. And what reading does for us, it helps us really begin to formulate concepts that can be beneficial to our communities, that we're preaching to our families and also to our own spiritual lives. And I think when you start reading in that context, your reason for reading changes. And I think that's another big thing, is that you have to have the right reason for what you're reading, right? That's going to determine how committed you are to reading a certain book or reading a certain author. And so those are kind of the things that I do. And I annotate everything. That's how I retain. You'll look at my books, and I usually try to annotate in 1 or 2 words. Keywords and I'll draw a big arrow to a section. I'll put a keyword or two, draw an arrow to that section, or put a big star over it. And so that when I go back into that book, I can quickly flip to the thoughts that impacted me. And I say, oh, that's why I annotated that, or that's why I wrote that. And then I'll take that material, and then I'll use it either in my writing or my preaching, or just even sometimes in counsel, words of encouragement that I got from a book, that's kind of my approach to reading. And it's worked out pretty well. But I'm always open to suggestions.
Excellent.
No, both of you mentioned too about writing in the books.
Yeah.
That's another thing that needs to be overcome. Now, probably 95% of the books I have are all quote unquote clean. But there are those in which I have underlined, marked up or whatever. And I think that's important. Reading has got to become more than just simply reading, as Brother Brock just mentioned. It's almost like entering into a conversation with that author, and it can be cordial. I know it's kind of one way, but we can say, I don't think so. And totally enter into the writing, which will in turn help the retention of what we're reading. Now, I do, for me, you mentioned underlining. Both of you did. Me, I have to have a ruler, and that really slows down things. It might be my graphic arts background, but
That's awesome.
I find it very hard to
Matthew Tuttle's got a message for you, Tony. Matthew Tuttle's got a message for you. NAYC 2019.
Yeah, I know.
Tuttle's coming for you.
If I could,
Hey, so let me
go ahead.
let me interject this real quick. I was speaking about reading, and so I want your guys' take on this. I think this will just make the conversation a little bit interesting here. I was listening to Jordan Peterson on his take. I like what he talks about reading.
Yeah.
And he mentions this, and he says books for him are portals.
Yeah.
And I know that was a powerful statement when he said that, because it kind of changes your perspective in one sense. Like when I read the Bible, I read it as a portal. I tell the church all the time, we're only a handshake away in eternity, and we're a handshake away from the apostles. We're not that far from them time wise, right? They're just right there. We could reach out, shake their hands. Peter's right there. Paul's right there. We're just a handshake away from our Pentecostal roots. And so for me, reading it is that it's a portal into different dimensions, history, memory, and thoughts that I get to partake in. And so I want to throw that out there and see what you guys think about that statement.
I like it. I think it is wonderful to remember that we're built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. And, I think it's wonderful to glean from secondary sources, but no amount of reading secondary sources can substitute for primary engagement with the foundation of the Word of God. And so I think that, reading and reading about Jesus is not the same as knowing Jesus. True. So there's a primary relationship with him. There's the Word, which tells us about him and engages us with him. And then there's others' comments about the Word, which is sort of like, for a sports team, to hear what a commentator or a columnist has about a sports team, but you've never seen him play, I don't know that you can really call yourself a fan.
Very good.
And then there's playing the sport yourself. If you've never thrown a baseball, do you really understand the game of baseball? And I think that's, reading it does open those portals, but it is a step removed from primary experience. And so I think that it's important as we read to remember that we need to know the God we're reading about. Theology can become an academic exercise that is intellectually thrilling and stimulating, and yet is not spiritually enlightening, and it's not devotionally maturing. And so we want to ensure that we're engaging the Lord every day and his Word, and not just those that are writing about his Word, or those of us that are way, way in the cheap seats because we're talking and tweeting about those that are writing about his Word about him. So we want to make sure we get the primary sources.
Yeah, primary theology, talking about the Bible, practicing primary theology, if you want to put it this way in a nutshell, good primary theology will always lead to deeper, more powerful doxology. In other words, I'm going to have a more profound worship as a result of having a deeper theology in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And so, Brother Chester, you haven't said much.
Yeah. Theology clarifies our experience.
Yeah.
But it doesn't cause our experience. It doesn't. It clarifies our thinking about God, but it doesn't introduce us to God. Only the Holy Spirit can do that. Only entering the covenant that Peter preached about can do that. But good theology can help us clarify our thinking. Because guys, left to our own devices, we come up with some stupid stuff. And so it's really good. It's really good to, there are inconsistencies, even in our own groups of fellowship that we have. There are inconsistencies that frankly, I love our quirks. But when somebody comes in from Google or Microsoft and they say, well, you're teaching this, but then what about this? Theology helps us get to the bottom of the whatabouts so that we remove some of the inconsistencies in our thinking and practice so that we can peel back those layers and get closer to the Word. And so I think it has a good function, but we have to be careful that it doesn't, the tail can't wag the dog. Right. People writing about Jesus cannot take our experience of Jesus. And
that's why we talk about primary sources. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, sir. I agree entirely, but we've talked way too long. I think Brother James Chester has his button on the eject segment of his tape recorder right now.
It's been great. We are over the time that we had previously discussed, but I'm telling you, this has been fantastic information. I would like to ask maybe one more thing before we wrap it up, unless anyone else wants to add to this. And I'm kind of apologize for springing this on you, Brother Mancino. I think you already mentioned your book, but I know guys like myself are getting ready for next year. What's the one book What's the book outside of the Bible? To prevent us from those good jokes. But outside of the Bible, what's the book for last year that you would say young pastor, young reader, or anybody needs to read? Brother Jackson, why don't you start?
There are a ton. I probably would say and catch them. That book is coming from a liberal theological perspective. It's not necessarily an apostolic perspective, but they talk about church history and how we have focused on shepherds and teachers to the exclusion of apostles, prophets, and evangelists.
Yes.
I love the way that the way that Hirsch writes. Again, you have to take some of their stuff with a grain of salt.
Sure.
It's an 8 or 10-year-old book, but I just found it this last year, and it really it was one that I marked up quite a bit, and I think people would enjoy it. Hearers and Doers by Van Hoosen, or Van Hooser would be another one about discipleship. That's a good one. Both of those are non-apostolic in origin, but they do have a good conversation to have with us as apostolics.
Right.
Excellent. And Brother Mancino, do you have the book?
Yeah, well, it comes in two forms. This is a small one. It's Cambridge University. The Atonement by, what's his name? William Lane Craig. This is the small one, and this is the big one, but you can't see it with the light there. Atonement and the Death of Christ. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I started with the small one, and reading it, there was just times I just, as Brother Brock mentioned, being a portal into worship, in reading in regards to the death of Christ and what that all, I just, wow. And it was, out of this, it inspired me. I may have quoted a sentence or two or whatever, but out of this, it inspired me to do, I think, 4 quick lessons on the cross and the meaning thereof. And
which Brother Mancino will be happy to share with all of our Apostolic Review listeners. If you'll email him, he'll be happy to share that lesson with you and the PowerPoints and illustrations that go with it.
Absolutely.
As a special this month only.
Pastor Brock?
Well, I guess I'll just mention 3 books. This one I read a while back ago, but I just want to talk about it for people in the community, especially pastors. Let's see if we get up there. It's a book I've read several times, The Pastor Theologian. And it kind of what Brother Jackson was talking about, some of the points he was making about that community of being bivocational pastor theologians and trying to add to our repertoire and our theological astuteness. And one of the things that is mentioned in this book is, and they believe, and I believe it too, he says that not the scholar that should be the primary theologian in their community. They should be the go-to theologian. And I've kind of taken that mantle, right? That responsibility of growing theologically, because we're the ones that are in the community. For us, it's not theory. It's actually practice. Yeah. A lot of stuff in the academy, it's theory. It's written out. It's theoretical. This is what should be done. But for the pastor, we're actually involved in it. And so for those debating whether I should, pursue theological books or whether I need to grow theologically, this book by Gerald Heistand and Todd Wilson, a very good read. And I read that 2 years ago. This year, the book. Go ahead.
Nope, I thought you were done. My bad.
Oh, no worries. Okay, and then The Analog Church by Young for 2020. Perfect book for the circumstances we're in. And he talks about the dangers of doing too much digital church. Great book. And 2021, I've already started my reading list there, and I'm going to focus a lot on Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. And so right now I'm reading his book on the supper, because I'm really trying to improve my theology about the supper. There was a statement, and I'll probably write some stuff on this that was made, and I soaked it in. This man said, Catholics make too much of the supper, and Pentecostals don't make enough of it. And so it's really kind of spurred me to really deepen my theology of the supper and what it means to the community. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, there's
Can
a
we,
Brett
can we go quick
Petrie.
round robin? Can we go quick round robin on apostolic books?
Yeah, sure.
I'll just do one. The biography of Willie Johnson by Lori Wagner is so inspirational to me, because here's a biracial woman in the 1950s and 60s in rural Oklahoma and the American Midwest, who's preaching revivals as with an alcoholic husband who was abusive, and her story was so inspiring to me in so many ways. So I think that biography by Sister Wagner is awesome. And of course, Stan Gleason's book on Follow the Lead is revolutionary in terms of discipleship and how we should use that.
Yes.
So those would be two that they're not brand new, but I'd recommend those two heartily.
If I could throw one in here, I believe it was last year that I read this, but the truth about succeeding in ministry, Transitions by Robert Mitchell.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
excellent. Anybody in a transition, going into a transition, or even saints that are experiencing that in the church, a very, very quality resource.
Right. I'll throw out, if you've never read I Am,
Whitley.
you're missing out, right? And oneness theology, very strong hermeneutic there for oneness theology. We Preach, Jerry Jones, another one.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Excellent book.
That's right up our alley that you should probably have in your library. And young writers, and I've dropped his name quite a bit this year, is Samuel Vaughn at Field the House. Good book. Young writer. When you read the book, if you've never met Samuel Vaughn or seen his picture, you wouldn't think that the writing was coming from someone that young.
Same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Brother Seagraves, the Holy
Oh,
Spirit.
Yeah.
A commentary on every reference of the Spirit in both Testaments. Also, I would say David Whitaker. He wrote a book on the cross called The Crux of the Matter. It is very good, as well as Brother Riggins, Understanding the Godhead and Understanding the New Birth. I think both of those are very good.
Yeah, Brother Riggins.
I am very pleased, I think, with the progress of apostolic books.
Yes.
There was a time, I'm glad that it's passed, where I don't know that I'd recommend any. But now there are a lot to recommend, and it's a good day for apostolic reading. Very good day.
Absolutely.
Right.
All right, gentlemen.
Amen.
Well, I think we'll make this a wrap. We want to thank everybody for being a part of this. Be sure to check out.
Good
the
luck
website.
editing it.
What's that?
Good luck editing.
Yeah, we were targeting 30 minutes, and I think we're nearing the hour mark. If we're not already there, we're getting close.
Well, anytime you have the doc on you, that's not going to happen.
We hasten to a close.
We had that moment. We'll look at it in a minute, but we had that moment when his screen went black. I know he left the conversation. I'm just going to imagine that he just went and saved a life, and then he's just coming right back. He went from the operating room right back to the mic. That's the kind of That's the quality we have here on this broadcast.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So is the website, correct me? Is it correct? The apostolicreview.com.
Apostolicreview.com. Yeah.
Check out all the social sites.
Twitter at Review Apostolic. Facebook apostolicreview.com. Instagram Apostolic Review, and Parler at Apostolic Review. There's not a lot of traction on Parler, but that's the redundancy plan. That's the just in case.
Yes. Yes.
But we're not doing a lot of stuff on there, but you just might want to get an account there. We kind of reserved it.
Yes. And so we didn't, a lot of these broadcasts start with the, share, please share, like, we reserve that for the end. So like our stuff, share, get the word out there, and look for more content. We really have some exciting content upcoming.
Yeah.
And thank you all for being a part.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Blessings.